Thank you very much, Dr. Vangelis Tsiligiris. I hope I've got the pronunciation right there. Great.
Very good, I would say.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so obviously with the conditions that we're working under at the moment with the COVID, we want to look at the future of transnational education post-COVID. And so I guess the first question I would ask or look at is, your research focuses on transnational education, which is quite a broad church. So if we could sort of narrow it down to where your research lies within that, could you explain a little bit to us about that?
Yeah, first of all, let me just give you a brief profile of what I've done, because that aligns pretty much with my research. So I've been doing work in this space for about 18 years now, and 12 of those years I was a manager at a college as a host institution. So I was managing and developing partnerships for about a decade, more than a decade. So my PhD actually emerged out of this, and I identified a gap in the research at the time, because most of the at the time, most of the quality assurance processes were quite strict. So they were saying, here's a program that has been developed in one country. If you want to do it, you have to do it exactly as it is being developed. The problem from a teaching and learning perspective is that as educators, we know that we need to tweak the delivery according to who the student is. So actually this model, instead of promoting quality, it was actually reducing the overall outcome of quality. So my research, my PhD was focusing on quality management in transnational education by focusing on the student experience and the teaching and learning side. So I was questioning the model of this sameness, as we call it, between one program that has been delivered in one country and another program that is delivered in another country as a mechanism to quality assure the transnational education. So my PhD started from teaching and learning, quality management, and then I've expanded on other areas. So I've done papers in business models in transnational education. So I was trying to identify, so okay, what are the factors we should consider if we want to develop a transnational presence in one country. And the reason for that is there might be language barriers, there might be different conditions in the market. So one country may have, let's say, 5 local private universities already. Another country may have none. And it could be only like private colleges with no power to award their own degrees. So the way that you are going to approach these different countries, if you are an institution, let's say in the UK or Netherlands or Germany, is completely different. So one of the papers I did was in trying to use the Porter's diamond model to adapt it for this purpose, for identifying the factors that affect the market in TNE. Another research that I've done and I'm quite interested in is to try to identify whether transnational education and international student mobility are substitutes. Because there's a long debate that TNE is cannibalizing international student mobility. So whether, let's say, a university offering a course in Malaysia somehow cannibalizes the mobility of Malaysian students coming to the UK. So that was a piece of work I did for the Observatory of Borderless Higher Education back in 2014, looking at the numbers of TNE and international mobile students. And the results there show that the two are different. So it's 2 different markets. So the TNE student is quite different to the international student. So yes, overall, this summarizes what I've been interested in. And recently, in the past couple of years, we've been trying to capture the impact of TNE and the impact of TNE for both ends. So for exporting institutions and for importing institutions, for exporting countries and importing countries. And we have published one book in 2018, which was about the impact in exporting countries and mostly about why they do TNE and what they are looking to get out of it. And now we have the second book coming out in August, which is about the impact in importing countries. So yeah, that's more or less my area of interest within TNE.
Can I just ask a question regarding that? Working in an offshore campus, if you like, with a mother campus in a different country. I understand what you're saying about cannibalizing, but isn't that the point? That what we're doing is we're snaring the people that can't afford to go to the mother campus country. And so we've got them here. Now this, if you don't mind, I'll sort of double-edged question. By redefining the delivery, or aren't we watering it down in a sense?
Yes and no. It depends which pole of this debate you are taking. Obviously, the more descriptive approach is to say, okay, the key question is, we have already students coming from a country. Do we want to have a presence in this country? And the implications of that are twofold. One is, okay, the same student may not come at the campus. B, we may also, in relation to that, we may be losing money because the price premium is different. So if a student can come in the main campus and pay the full fee, why we should be offering the same thing locally at the reduced price? Well, the argument for that is that this is exactly what the research shows, that in fact, the student who is willing to go to the main campus, they will go anyway. They will not compromise between the two. And it's not a matter for them, it's not a matter of price, because the students usually who go to the main campus are the ones who can afford it. Mm. There might be a fraction of it that, yes, they would prefer to study locally to save the money and not to be stretched quite a lot financially, but it's not the majority. Now, the case of, say, the United Arab Emirates and some other countries, say Malaysia or Singapore, is quite different because they've involved quite a lot. So they are not considered to be the traditional importing TNE countries. They have involved mainly because they have institutions with degree awarding powers. So these institutions, have become autonomous. Yeah. And students go there not simply because is, let's say, a program of a UK university offered in this country, but because it's a critical mass of institutions and is a network of things there, including businesses. So they can see the prospect of, yes, I will go there, I will be part of a community, and then I will continue on, work there or whatever. So I think it's slightly different. In the United Arab Emirates, I would say that what you tend to get is you tend to get some students from the sending countries, say India, who would not be able to afford to go to the UK, but they see a good alternative, TNE, United Arab Emirates, with a prospect of working locally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dr. Vangelis, it's too early due to the current COVID situation to talk about September or the next trimester. But due to the current situation, how do you see the landscape of TNE changing? Lack of student mobility, travel restrictions, obvious hybrid models that we might bank on now, and also specific allowances by local regulators, different from country to country. In a major way, how do you see the landscape changing?
It's very difficult to make assumptions, and the problem I have with all this scenario is that my background is I'm an economist, and for an economist it's very difficult to think about scenario planning without some parameters, and we don't have these parameters. We don't have anything substantial to use in order to come up with some assumptions. So it's all about hit and miss kind of scenario planning at the moment. So what I would say is that for the very short term, what will happen in September, nobody knows. For the medium term, my understanding from what I see is that international students will still want to travel, and they will still want to go to the main campus, and the dynamic will still be there, and it will resume. The history has shown us that in similar situations, pandemics, terrorism, a number of different things that have impacted the international higher education, things came back to normal after, say, a year or two. So I wouldn't say that it's going to be any dramatic change on that regard. What I see is an opportunity for providers to see the potential new models that may emerge out of this, which is something that I have been talking about for 3-4 years now. My argument has been that in the future it's going to be more difficult to distinguish between local delivery and offshore delivery.
Okay.
So now the only thing that distinguishes between a TNE student and a home campus student is the location. So the definition is a student who studies in a place other than the main campus is considered to be a TNE student. With all the things that are happening, but at the same time with the use of technology, the two worlds are going to converge. So in the future, it's going to be very difficult to distinguish between the two. And universities now, this pandemic has accelerated this process. So it's like a catalyst that has created an opportunity to implement these models. So it means, for instance, that in the future, we may see programs that are partly delivered in one country and then the rest is delivered in the main campus. So the international mobility aspect will be there, but not the same duration, which makes sense in several respects. One is sustainability in terms of the environment, whether you need people flying all over the place all the time. B, obviously reducing the risk of a potential impact in a case of a similar pandemic. So if you are able to offer things locally, then you take that risk out of the equation. Third is the cost aspect. So if a student can study part of their degree locally at a reduced cost, and then the international experience aspect happens, but only, let's say, for a part of the course, that then, going back to the question previously about TNE student versus international student, this proposition will fit the requirements of an international student. So if I'm an international student and I'm told that here's a program that you are able to complete, let's say, the first half of it locally, and then the second half of it, including your project, you will go to the main campus, I may compromise for that. and that is a good value proposition. So what I would suggest that for the future you will see more of that. So you see more of what I call global delivery model.
Yeah, we there are a number of universities that offer that. I know for sure for PhDs, and so this could potentially have a huge impact on satellite campuses, if you like, because if it's a case of if we're talking about bums on seats, the more people we've got at the university, the cheaper we can make the education. So if that's the case, and we don't need necessarily a campus over, in a different country, and we've got the mother campus delivering everything online, that means that rather than spending fees in the satellite campus, then they can spend that money on a flight to go to the mother campus, as you just mentioned there. So does this signal the demise of
Offshore? First of all, it's very important to understand that I don't think, and that's what most institutions realize now, that online is not enough. Mm. So by local delivery, we don't mean online. In fact, the main challenge now for universities in the UK and in other importing countries of international students is how to secure a student experience in September that satisfies this drive of students, especially undergraduates, who want to have this face-to-face interaction. Yeah. So online is not enough. Mm. And we have seen that coming up in research done by the British Council, where they've asked prospective students whether you want to go online for, let's say, a period of time, and they prefer to defer. Yeah. They don't like online. So I think for satellite campuses, in fact, quite the opposite is a big opportunity for them to act as a network of, obviously for contingency purposes, but at the same time for adding value and supporting this global delivery model. I think the main problem for most institutions is that because they don't have a direct satellite campus that they know the quality and they can manage this infrastructure, they are a bit hesitant to trust someone or offshore to deliver face-to-face. So I think the universities that have a satellite campus are more well placed to implement this kind of models. Additionally, the satellite campus, which is a completely different thing when you talk about TNE, it has a completely different identity. And depending on the country you are in, whether you have your own degree awarding powers, which is a critical thing, you gradually become a brand of yourself, and you can leverage this to create opportunities. So rather than importing programs, you may be exporting programs. So collaborating with other institutions that they don't have degree awarding powers in other countries. So it's like a life cycle where from being an importer, you become an exporter. And at the same time, I would say that satellite campuses at the same time, they have all the other elements that they can implement, which is research, exchange schemes. So all this, I think, place satellite campuses in a position of strength. Mm. However, I think the challenge is that as in the traditional universities in exporting countries, they face the problem of, in a pandemic like that, okay, what happens if we have to maintain all these facilities and we are not able to go in these facilities, how we go about that. So that's the drawback.
So you spoke about quality assurance, and assessment of learning has always played, and assessment moderation has played a part in quality assurance of TNE delivery. So at least, if not online, but do you see assessment going online with digital tools so that a better check can be kept on TNE quality assurance?
Yeah, I think in terms of quality assurance, we have come a very long way. Both the partners and both the exporting institutions and the national bodies, the quality assurance agencies in different countries, they have done some really, really good work. So considering the size of this operation, over the years, the level of quality has been really good across the board. Obviously, yes, there have been some bad apples, as in every industry. But in comparison with other industries, I think higher education has been, really, really good in terms of the quality. So I think the system that is in place is quite well developed now, and there are mechanisms to assure quality. In my view, assuring quality is not a problem at the moment. What is the problem? It goes back to the experience of the students. So it goes back to the learning experience and less about quality assuring. So quality assurance is about meeting some minimum expectations and minimum standards. The question is, are you able to get the most out of your students? That is the question for, and particularly for TNA. So I think it's always a challenge when you have students who are international and you offer to them a program that is not developed in their own country. And on top of that, now you have the online or the blended learning. I think there are tools that are used already in online assessment. So is proctoring, is a number of different tools you can use. I will go back and I will insist on the content of the assessment and how do you personalize this, how you contextualize it. I think that's the next step in the quality management rather than assurance. Quality management process is how you contextualize and how you personalize the assessment of its program. Well, first of all, the content and then the assessment.
And also for employability and graduate outcomes, linking it.
Yes, that's another big one. And recently in our open forum, we had discussions about this. Yes, is a big topic these days. I think what it will come very soon is some scrutiny about what is the student experience and the student employability for TNE students. Because there's a lot of, in the exporting countries, so let's say in the UK, it's quite a lot on this. It's a lot of effort, a lot of investment, a lot of time spent by academics and administrators on managing the experience and particularly the employability, because that's quite visible, is measured nationally. What's happening with the TNE students? That's the unknown at the moment. So I think the institutions and regulators, we are now shifting their emphasis also to that area. So they would say, okay, we're doing great in the home campus. What about these students who we have in another country? What do we do for them? So yes, I would say the employability and the student experience overall is an issue that is going to be very, very popular in the years to come. The contextualization is also here very important. So employability, if you're talking about employability in the UK, is a different thing in relation to employability in the United Arab Emirates, and a different thing in Malaysia. And then it goes back to the content of the course, what you offer in order to meet these employability benchmarks. So yeah.
Would you say that enough research partnerships to, enough contribution is being made by host countries to include research partnerships to benefit local students and the country where the education exported to?
No.
No.
and that is a pity, because in last year we did a research for the British Council. We did with Janet Ilieva and a couple of other people. We did Alex Usher and Pat. I don't remember the surname, I'm sorry. We did a major piece of work for the British Council, where part of it was we looked about the international research partnerships. And we did some analysis on the Scopus database, tracking the quality of the publications that came out of the different collaborations. And the outcome of 25 years of analysis, there was a massive piece of analysis there. 25 years of analysis showed that the output, the research output that comes out from an international research collaboration, so between researchers who are in different countries and in different institutions, tends to have a higher number of citations, which means in terms of citations, it is a better quality, more impactful research. So it means that for both partners, it pays off if they invest to promote this kind of partnerships in research.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen widely because mainly it is for TNE is a little bit out of the context of the objectives, and that is a problem, which goes back to how universities are deciding to establish TNE arrangements in the first place, what they want to get out of it. Most universities, especially in the old days, they used to embark on a TNE partnership just because a member of staff had a connection in a country and a connection in an institution. It was not a very well thought venture. So the universities that have well thought about their internationalization strategy and they have embarked on a TNE arrangement on the basis of that, you see that they have promoted also the research, the international research collaboration aspect. And I would say that the universities who are more determined to pursue an internationalization strategy and agenda, they are the ones who are going to invest more in the international research collaboration because it pays off, definitely.
Okay. My next question is about sustainability of partnerships. So due to the quality of international infrastructures in local countries, there has been some concern regarding investment as well in TNE. Where do you see that going?
Sustainability, I mean, you refer in terms of the longer term feasibility and ability to be financially sustainable.
Yeah.
Yes, it goes back to the same topic we were just discussing, that several institutions embarked on projects which were not viable without thinking about it carefully. Yeah. And I think this creates a bad record for the industry that influences others. So it's like it creates a bad example and they say, oh, why should we do that? Because X institution failed in that country, which is not necessarily the reason why an institution failed. It's not the country or the context. Is a mix of when you did what,
right,
and how did you implement it.
Right.
So it requires a very careful consideration. Overall, the the overall argument here is TNE is like international business.
Mm.
So in international business, if you want to export in another country, you have to do some proper analysis. So you have to understand the context, the competition that is there, the customer profile, and then you decide how you are going to, say, penetrate the market. Is it going to be like a globalization strategy, a local development strategy? So it's exactly the same process. And interestingly enough, not many universities are using that approach. So I would say that before you embark on projects like, let's say, a satellite campus that we know is a very long-term investment, and mainly you would do that not to generate profit. You would do that mainly to generate other things like a global presence, strengthen your brand internationally. So it would not generate profit in the sense that, you know, you have like international students coming in the main campus. So particularly in this kind of projects, you need some very, very careful planning that takes into account all the different parameters. The situation now is that most of the markets are quite saturated, so it needs to be extra careful, and it goes from risk management to strategic management, I would say, because a lot of about the TNE, mainly the emphasis is on due diligence.
Right. Yeah.
When you approach someone to get some partnership, the emphasis is on due diligence. Who are these guys? Are they credible? Can they do it? And all that, which is fine. But on top of that, it should be also, okay, in terms of the strategic aspect of it, where we are in terms of the market demand, where we are in terms of the market supply, what are the demographics, what are the potential external factors that may impact the market, and so on.
Apart from the focus of student learning experience and employability angle, do you see any urgent areas of research developing within the TNE context, and especially post-COVID, that researchers or, say, PhD students can go into?
Is a difficult one. I think the interesting thing would be about the models of provision. So overall, I would say a very interesting area would be the models of provision. It depends what kind of researcher you are. If you are a researcher that likes to do exploratory research, and you like the uncertainty of digging and finding and adjusting, that is a great area. If you're looking for a more like hypothesis testing, positivist kind of approach, you should be looking in things like expectations of students, understanding the student profile a bit better, quantifying and understanding again the factors that affect the decision making of students. So that's quite is going to be quite important. So to understand how students decide to stay in a country rather than going in the home campus. So yeah, I would say this. Possibly, I'm expressing my own preference here, but yeah, I would say these are the important ones. And obviously, the other aspect that comes up is the use of technology within the context of international higher education.
Right. You've done a lot for TNE in terms of you've created the TNT Hub, and you were holding regular webinars as well since is it since COVID the lockdown happened, or are they regular ongoing? So you brought TNE to the forefront and kind of made it accessible for researchers and instructors and learners everywhere. So would you shed a little light on that, your work regarding that? And yeah.
All right. It goes back to when I was a PhD student. So it was back in 2010, I think, 2010, 2010 to 2014. I realized that at the time there was very little research on this topic. And I realized that TNE was a topic that was not to be found within a structure of a research center or research unit. And there were some people doing research that they were operating, as I call them, as lone wolves. So they were doing their own thing. It was like 20, 30 people all over the world doing that. And we all get to know each other, and mainly via Twitter, which was a big thing back then. And I realized that they faced the same problem as I was facing. I'm an economist and I teach finance and accounting, and I'm managing programs in that. So my research has nothing to do with what I teach, which is the case for many of these people. So let's say people who are managing partnerships, they may be psychologists or sociologists or economists, but they like the topic because they see the dynamic of it and the impact it has. So they were doing research. So what I thought, it would be a good idea to bring all these people together under one virtual roof, and try to get something out of it, because it is a lot of experience, a lot of lessons learned there. So the idea was, okay, why don't we come together and see what we can get out of it? So we started back in 2016, and in 2016 we had our first symposium here in the UK. Then we had a couple of other events. In 2018 we had another one, and this year we were planning to have one in June, which was obviously cancelled. So we were having this biannual conference, if you like, and out of them we were getting a book out. So after the conference we were having a call for papers. Now with the pandemic and the fact that the people are working online, it was an opportunity to bring them together into a virtual working group and trying to get them to collaborate online. So that was the idea.
So did it work? Does it work better online, or is it better in the flesh?
Yeah, and also adding to that, like the future of conferences. Do you see the symposium being held online in the future? Because COVID's pushed us into these directions, which there are silver linings too. So do you see the next conference online?
It could be. It could be. If it is online, it could be more frequent.
Yeah.
That is the thing. It takes less time to do it. It is more impactful. So I'm not against the one or the other. Definitely, as an academic and as someone who goes to conferences to speak several times over the year, I would prefer to be online, because mainly from the environmental perspective, the footprint is huge. So there's an opportunity, I think, to review international conferences. There's no point of flying all over the place. I would prefer to spend more time with my students rather than spending time in conferences when I can do it online. I think that's the argument. So I think it works better online.
Absolutely. Okay. Any advice for instructors and lecturers or researchers within the TNE context going to the future now? So about TNE or about delivery in TNE as such?
Yeah, I would say keep in mind that transnational education is not different to international higher education is at the heart of internationalization. So sometimes is often considered to be of secondary importance, but I would say, and this pandemic has shown that this is at the heart of internationalization, because you interact with students directly. And keeping in mind that the emphasis will shift to a global delivery model, I think they should be, particular researchers, they should be ready for that, and should be investing more of their time on that and keeping up with the developments. One thing that is often neglected, and this shows the power of TNE, is that is no better way to demonstrate how higher education promotes sustainable development goals other than TNE. So it's a lot of case studies to be written about how TNE promotes sustainable development goal, let's say number 4, access to good quality education. We know that we have students that otherwise they would not be able to access this quality of higher education if a TNE provider was not available. So it's a life-changing experience. So if you follow up with your graduates, they will confirm that. And I think that is the value to be captured. There's a lot of impact that has not been captured when it comes to TNE.
I have one last question on international students and their level of English language and academic integrity issues connected to that. So are the universities doing enough to adapt the programs to their level? And is there any research done on that, that the program delivery or the local instructor or the examinations, are they adapted to the second language learner? And is there a rise in academic integrity issues due to that?
Yeah, can I just add something there as well? Yeah. Because we've seen a huge rise in essay mills. That's something I want to concentrate on with some research. And so with students being online, it's face-to-face, you know your student, you can tell what their levels are. Whereas if they're not face-to-face, if it is only online, then you don't have that same connection. So you can't tell whether this student has gone through an essay mill, because most of these things are coming back with zero plagiarism because they're running them through Turnitin and Erkin first. And so, it's not like we can catch them like we used to even only 3 semesters ago.
Yeah. I would see them as 2 separate things. The first one, the adaptation of the assessment and the content of the course goes back exactly to what the case I was making before. Yeah. So the case I make is we know that certain nationalities have language problems because it's a cultural thing. So let's say Chinese students or Greek students, even, let's say from my country, Greek students, they may have a diploma in English, but they are very hesitant to use English, especially in writing. So by insisting on offering exactly the same assessment as it is in the main campus, in fact, you're not doing them any good. You are not actually assessing how well they have met the learning outcomes. Okay. So it might be better if you have a mix of local language and English to do this transition. And this is the case, let's say, in Greece, so where they offer courses that the first year and the second year is in the local language, and then the third year is in English. So yes, definitely, I think there needs to be some adjustment to meet the learner characteristics.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you go against the education quality, which is not about simply benchmarking. It's about, have you been able to assess the student in a way that they demonstrate how well they've met the learning outcomes? That's the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second thing about the plagiarism, that's a big unknown. Is a huge unknown, and no one has found a credible solution to deal with the problem of essay mails yet.
Mm.
My best bet is that what you need to do probably is you need to invest more time in emphasizing to students what are the implications of that.
Yeah.
In the context of employability, ethical elements, and the value of having a degree. How this will feel after 20 years when you look back.
Mm.
That's something that works for students. So when you have this induction talks, it should not be about, okay, page X in the handbook is about this regulation, page Y is about that regulation. It should be more about what should be your approach as a learner in a higher education environment in a world that moves very fast, which is the other thing. We know that students need to upskill, reskill several times after they graduate.
Mm.
Imagine a student that has forged their submissions throughout. They would be in a very, very weak position afterwards.
It could be difficult given the context of TNE because different cultures deal with these issues in different ways. So, there's no one size fit all kind of formula there. So there is plagiarism in TNE and in TNE contexts. And due to different cultural backgrounds, it might not be considered plagiarism.
I think you'll find that in home campuses too, not only transnational. I think there may be more inclined because of the language issues here with international students. But my view is that we need to offer more support, and we need to offer it right from the word go.
And like you said, try to make them think 20 years on, how would this look? Yes.
I think that's the best investment, and definitely I can confirm that is not an issue only of the TNE. It's a widespread issue. It happens everywhere, and is a big concern in the UK. Is a big concern for regulators. They try to come up with some response to that. It's a big concern for the government. So there is a debate here in the UK whether essay meals should be banned altogether as companies. So that's another great area for research, which is to explore what are the factors that in fact drive students to this behavior. In most instances, as you say, it might be that it's a cultural issue. They are not aware that using, say, large quotations from several websites without citation is a problem. No matter what you tell them when it comes to referencing and all that, they would consider that to be a normal thing to do. So it might be a training issue. It may be also some other things that relate to the pressure and the workload and the mental health aspect, which is another growing area. Another dimension to it might be also the fact that is this mindset of a student as a customer, where now the student sees this process more as a transaction rather than as a collaboration. So all these angles are quite interesting to explore more, but definitely there is no definitive answer on how to solve that.
What can local educators or schools do to prepare the student for the sudden shift in education when they go on to a transnational campus? So we've delivered the international education to their doorstep, but the sudden shift in the type of education that they are getting is massive for a lot of students. So they're not in that international mindset. They're not ready to receive that high quality education, say. So is there enough being done by schools locally to prepare that student for that?
I wouldn't say from local schools. I would say is the responsibility, if we're talking about the TNE, is mainly the responsibility of the exporting institution, say a university in the UK, to put in place the mechanisms there, or to check that the mechanisms are there to support this transition. And in a couple of papers, I have been arguing for the need to move from what is called a retrospective quality management approach to a prospective quality management approach. So currently, the emphasis is at the end of the process. So we say X number of students passed, X number of students failed, this happened, we have to create a course report and we identify the problems, and then we plan action from the next year. But the problem with that is that next year you have different students. So it might be that different problems arise. So the argument is, and using this retrospective prospective concept that Biggs has talked about, rather than responding to a previous cohort challenges, you need to understand your student at the beginning of the process. Right. So in the beginning, there has to be diagnostics. There has to be some assessment of the student, not assessment per se, but understanding where the student is in terms of expectations, how they approach group work, how they feel about presenting in front of others. And if you identify gaps, you need to have an extensive induction that goes into these matters. So my argument has been that in countries where these cultural aspects are quite strong, so say China again, where we know is a problem about working with others and coming forward to present, there needs to be an integrated year-long induction where you teach these skills to students quite extensively. So in this way, you manage more effectively the outcome. So rather than ticking boxes and say, oh, we have completed the moderation in this module and second marking, it goes down to enabling the learner to perform. So yeah, I would argue for this extensive induction.
Yeah.
Well, you spoke about the training and the induction to gain all those outcomes. What about the professional development of the local tutor? Is there enough being done by the university to help the tutors on the ground or in terms of professional development? We know that there are partnerships, and sometimes it's the main campus providing some PD online or the partner providing some professional development. But is there enough being done to help the tutor achieve that too on the ground?
This depends largely on the university. Mm-hmm. My experience with the universities I was collaborating as a partner, it was very good. Okay. It was quite a lot of effort from staff flying out once a year at least to share good practice, to provide guidance. So it varies. I would argue that we need to create some a benchmark, and I was arguing that there's a need for all the people who teach on TNE, especially of UK universities, to have exactly the same profile as the profile of the staff who study in the UK, who teach in the UK. And by that I mean not necessarily PhDs and research and all that, but mainly a teaching and learning qualification or training. So something like the fellowship of the Higher Education Academy, and not as a way to say, oh, in order to hire you, you need to have that, otherwise we don't hire you. Not that, but once you hire someone, to have a mechanism in place that you can help them, you can develop them towards this direction.
Absolutely, yes.
So rather than staff development happening sporadically, say once a year here and then, come up with a program that actually is there and enables people who teach offshore to acquire the fellowship after, let's say, a number of years. And in this way, what you do, you add value if you are a university and in exporting country, and you have a very good story to tell in terms of capacity building. So you demonstrate and you say, well, in fact, we've been working with these guys in that country, and on top of, say, 200 students that we have enrolled, we have helped 10 members of staff to become fellows, and now these guys can go in another country, can come in the UK if they want to teach. So we enable them to become educators. So yeah, I would argue for that.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Tsiligiris, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom.
Likewise, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.